I'm Donna Dunn with the Dunbarton Historical Awareness Committee, and I'm here with Fred Mullen, also of the committee, to interview Kathleen Sweeney Mitchell.
Hello, good morning. Nice to have you here, Donna, helping me to catch up also on some of the history of the town of Dunbarton. And I'm kind of pleased, and I know certainly my father, John Sweeney, would be very pleased to know that his house is now among the venerables of the town.
And what year were you born, Kathleen?
I was born in 1938 in Manchester, and the family gravitated here. Way we ended up on Alexander Road was because the end of the road where the Holts now live was a family farm in the 19th century. Both Weatherby and Browns are connected with the family there. And my mother's cousin, Sarah, lived where the Hill family lived, and her last name was Sarah Hill.
At that time, did this road go all the way through to where?
Yes, it did.
It did, okay.
It did. The old-time map, which I have at the top of the stairs, actually shows the road going clear down to where. And from what I understand, was fairly traveled, because to get from where before 77 went through was
Did that road bring you to the old train stations?
no.
No. Okay,
No.
that was further south.
No, that was
Okay.
much
Right,
further
that
south.
was a road from the center of town that went out, that was called Everett Road, I guess, that went to the old Everett station.
And that, go ahead.
Okay. So did you spend, I assume you spent some time over in Ware because of its proximity, and you had friends in this whole area?
Well, let's go and start with the beginning of the history of the family, at least on mother's side of the family. 1635, shipload of folk came in from England into Port of Boston, and they moved from Boston to, I believe, Danvers for a while. They were certainly in Salem at the time of the witch trials. Two of those witches who were witches in quotes who were hung was John Proctor and Susanna Martin. And then all of this time when these people, it wasn't just a family, all the time that a goodly number of these boat people stayed together wherever they moved. They moved in and were formative in families in the area. I do not have the date, but they ended up a lot of them ended up in Goffstown and Ware and Dunbarton. And many of them are relatives connected not only to that boatload, but to families in addition. And it's strange to pick up the Dunbarton books by Mrs. Hadley and Mr. Noyes, that the names are so familiar. I have the family Bible here, and some of those names are in there. But to realize in the 1960s that my mother was living with the names around the town and in Goffstown and in Ware, that she was living among descendants of people from that original boat tour. And I just find that absolutely amazing. I have Dunbarton, that they were here with the formation of Dunbarton in 1765. There were, from mother's family itself, which includes the Browns, the Weatherbys, and so forth, connected with the farm, were living in the Brockton area of Massachusetts. And they came here, well, in part because I'm sure they visited up at the farm. It was from the Brockton strain, which, as I said, Sarah Hill was mother's cousin. And in 1941, she sold the property to my mother and father for the grand sum of $1. So it was that kind of family exchange.
Mhm.
And it's approximately an acre of land is what we have. And Daddy, who was never a carpenter, a plumber, or an electrician, undertook to begin the building of the house here. And he had various friends who would come by and help.
And you said that most of the wood came from the hurricane.
And most of the wood came from the 1938 hurricane, which my brother Jack points out when we see various things happening at this point with the wood in the house, it's because it was green when it was installed, and it does dry out and
moves.
and move and change. We, my husband and I, Robert Mitchell, acquired the house in, I believe it is 2003 is on our deed from Mother's and Dad's estate. And we added this porch that we have with us now. The little cottage that you see in the background got named the Bordello. In my time, my husband had picked up a marvelous red lampshade with fringes and so forth. And when we came up here, we were just in the process of converting the space that had been built originally as a machine shop for Brother Jack, that we had turned it into a extra sleeping space and beds. In the, let's see, between probably 2005 and probably 8, we had the wonderful services of Billy Don Smith of Hopkinton, who was a painter, and as we found out later, he had never done much in the way of building construction. But this wonderful space that we have here now was all Billy Don's, and what he had done at the time was to gut the north end of the house downstairs, and from it we got the kitchen back where it used to be, and we also got a huge, what we consider huge bathroom out of the space. In the 50s, early 60s, Maynard Jr., Bamisay's son, was the one who had done some reconstruction here at the house. The bedrooms, we then had Daddy raised the roof, literally in the 1950s.
Do you have any pictures of what the house looked like?
Yeah,
back then?
I do have some
Perfect,
that I can
perfect.
pull out.
Do you still have the red lamp out in the bordello?
I am not sure. The kids have done a recent tidying up out there, and I'm not sure if the lamp, but we always kept the shade after, but we used to hang the lamp that bore the shade was hung in the window here, so that and we did have a red light bulb on the porch that gave the feeling for the sleeping space. We also have the screen house that is up behind you in the gardens, and that has had, that was also transformed for us by Billy Don. He had done a massive amount of work there, and then he had done the cedar shingles through all 3 of them.
So where does this Billy Don, where's he from? He's from town?
He was from Hopkinton, okay. Off, I can't think of the name of the street. And he is now, Billy passed, I think, probably at least 5 years ago.
So this house, we would say, was probably built in 1938?
It was started in 1938. It was livable in the early 40s.
Okay, all right. So, tell us about growing up here and growing up in this neighborhood, and who did you know? Who did you hang around with?
Well, originally when we were first, the family had, I presume that between 38 and 42, that the family were still pretty much located down in Manchester. And after Pearl Harbor, my father was ineligible to enlist as a serviceman, so what he took for his contribution was to become a fireman down at Pratt Whitney Aircraft down in East Hartford. So we were down there for the war years, and we came after D-Day, or let's say, I guess, after D-Day, we came within 2 weeks. Daddy had acquired a vehicle. I believe it was a version of a 1932 pickup, and they loaded what furniture and stuff they could into the truck, and us kids in with the furniture, and we drove. I think it took 13 hours because we kept having flat tires, and at that time there was only one way to fix a flat tire. So anyway, we got here. The next day, my sister got to go off to school, walking uptown to the Dunbarton school, and I was not able to go to school because I had only one shoe. So until the truck got unpacked and all that kind of thing, I had to wait. Mother wasn't going to send me to school barefoot.
Bill Zeller used to go to
Yes,
school barefoot,
I know
and
this.
he was sent home
Yes.
repeatedly.
Well,
for his shoes.
Billy would show up, and his excuse was he had to chase the cows to pasture, and he'd show up in school, and at recess time, the teacher, Mrs. Faulkner, would send him packing to
Get his shoes.
on.
He didn't like wearing shoes.
And he did not. When he went to high school, he wore different socks, and always bragged he had another pair just like them at home. That was Billy.
So you did eventually go to school. What grades did you go to?
I started in 2nd grade, and Brother Jack started in 1st grade, and I forget the first, I don't think it was the first full year. Well, no, by the time that I went to school, we had Mrs. Hayes was in the lower room, and Mrs. Faulkner was in the upper room. Approximately, I'm going to say 25 kids in each classroom at that time. So we had Mrs. Hayes and Mrs. Faulkner for all the rest of our 2-room school experience, and I have to say, there were times in my education process elsewhere that I used to wonder if I was going to measure up because I had gone to a 2-room school. And I will tell you, I outperformed, everything because of the basis of the school that was given to us at that time. In the school, the opening exercises were, I'm going to say, approximately 15 minutes starting at 9 o'clock. In the lower room, we had the Lord's Prayer. We had usually a psalm was read from the Bible, and we had, of course, the Pledge of Allegiance of the flag was the beginning of the time. When it moved over, moved over in the 5th grade to the upper room, recitation of the Declaration of Independence was prominent in the opening exercises. Again, the flag. And then I recall, and this was all, of course, from memory, as you would memorize anything. There might have been a Bible verse in there just to connect the kids with well, I guess we would say today, the church and state.
Pretty much everybody was a Congregationalist back then, right?
Nope.
No?
We had the Baptist and the little Episcopal church on the north end of town.
But everybody got along.
Everybody got along. And the kids over at Montalona had more of a Manchester connection than what we had in the
That's why we find it very
center.
hard to get information about the Wheeler School on Twist Hill Road and the Montalona School, because everybody gravitated towards Manchester.
But Mrs. Faulkner and Mrs. Hayes were our beloved teachers. And then we had Mrs. Bartlett, the music teacher, who came once or twice a week. And
Was she a town person?
no, she lived Grassmere.
Yeah.
She came up from Grassmere, the back road, just beyond the village there. And she was in the house is still there. One of the occasions that I remember that Mr. Foote, the superintendent, was there. And every time that he was visiting at the same time we had music, she would have, each of the rooms would sing him one of their new songs that they liked. At noon times, Mrs. Butler was piano player.
So there was a piano in the school?
There was a piano,
Just
and
one
I
or
don't,
two?
I don't remember one in the lower room, but the upper room we definitely had a piano. And at noontime, after, especially in the winter, after we had finished our lunch, she would sit and play on the piano, and she even showed us how to waltz. And that was the music education that we got. The lower room I remember a lot with the five spoke chalk staff for learning to read music. I never did too well on the reading of it, but the singing and the dancing was.
I didn't know they had a piano. That's the first I've heard of that. Now, I wonder if that's one of the pianos that's upstairs at the library now.
It could
Very frugal Dunbarton.
very
Well, could be.
yeah very well
I'm
could
gonna have
be.
someone take a
Well,
look
she
at
taught
it.
us such, which I've been quoting on Facebook recently. "Stars are the windows of heaven" was one of the songs that we learned from her. "Where angels peep through, up in the sky, God keeps an eye on kids like me and you." Da 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 da.
Oh, I like that.
And then another one was "Place a candle in the window, for this is Christmas Eve. Someone out along the highway may Christmas cheer receive." And this was, but some of the old time war songs, Mirzi Dotes and so on and so forth. I mean, she did everything. She wasn't just a short.
Religious, yes.
Was not either religious or short schmooch music. But
so I assume that you had plays or recitals or.
we had on Memorial Day, we had readings.
And these were at the school, or were they?
No,
over upstairs?
we rehearsed at school, but we did them upstairs in the town hall. So that Memorial Day, which was not always on a Saturday, was still celebrated in a separate way, and all the other programs. At Christmas, our Christmas program was done up in the town hall. Our senior eighth grade class always did a play of some kind.
Do you remember any of the names of them?
Well, let's see. There was one that was Streamlined Cinderella. That was one of them. There was another one that was like the Mikado. So we had sort of kimonos on and fans and
Okay.
that sort of thing. But the big one that we did was, for my eighth grade class, was Tom Sawyer, and the beautiful flats that were built for the scenery for that were commandeered by Mrs. Gravis. And she had drawn out the pictures and the design, and then we got release time to go over and paint.
Someone else talks about painting the fence on those.
Yes.
She was a marvelous artist. I didn't realize how.
She was.
Painted the King of Spain apparently at one point, but none of her backdrop cloths remain.
That was one of the first things I asked Billy when first time I was up there with my family, because I think you were just beginning to conceive the town hall area. The other thing that we got to do was to go for the eighth grade class. Part of our civics was to go to the town meeting. And we would go and sit there. We would go and sit there and watch the town do its business.
Somewhat colorful sometimes.
Well, the one that that was memorable, particularly to the Sweeneys, was that evidently Mr. Stone had stood up and he gave a long tale about he's got two ways to get out of his place in the winter time, and usually one of them was blocked. Well, my father jumps up and says, "Well, sir, I have 5 ways to get up or to get out, and they're all blocked." There was one year that it was not long after they got the grader that we had a huge snowstorm. This would have been late 40s. And it took the grader almost 5 days to get from the corner up to the farm. So we did not go to, mother did not send us over to school. She and Dad would walk up to, they were able to get some kind of ride up at the Four Corners. And
For those that are listening, that would be the corner of Barnard Hill Road, Alexander Road, and Mansion Road.
Right. And they had kept sleds up there on the Maxwell's, under the Maxwell trees, and put the groceries on them and bring the groceries home on sleds
heavens.
from over the.
And Maxwell would be the Ramseys, where the Ramseys live?
Yes,
and
they
that's
were,
now the
no, the Maxwells were the house where the beautiful one, the restoration.
Oh, okay, all right.
I don't
Yes.
know the name
The
of.
Grandview Farm.
Okay.
It's, yes.
Well, that
the
was-
Williams Farm.
Right.
Right.
Well, that at that time was it was the Maxwell's farm
Okay.
that was then the farm was purchased by the Williams,
Mhm.
and then it was passed on for another.
That was one of
generation.
those summer homes that used to bring in guests. We had them all over Dunbarton. The summer population around here swelled by hundreds. And it was a nice source of income for the farms that really weren't operating as farms anymore. The women.
Well, the Williams farm,
that
in
continued.
fact, they were until the unfortunate demise who was still doing the fields
Mhm.
around here. There are 3 huge hay fields here. Between here and was beyond Francis's barn.
Right.
Francis is a cousin. Let's see. I guess she comes over as maybe a 3rd cousin.
Mhm. That's so interesting.
And be here, and there were 3 fields. This one, there was the next one, and Francis built the road down to the 3rd field, which is where she is still living
Mhm.
now. And we used to, coming home from school, we walked. We did not get transportation, I think, until I'm going to say probably 47, 48. We walked.
And that
to school.
transportation was that with cars that people
It
rented
was,
to come out.
Junior Mooney had a van car, no windows on the van part.
Right, they tossed you in the back. And
That they tossed us in the back, and we were originally we had to walk from here down to Stark Pond to pick up the ride to go to school.
Okay.
And then they finally, with the Ramseys moving in, there were
Enough.
half a dozen of us that we were then able to have
4 corners.
the being picked up along the route there, and that was a big change. But we walked. Mother wouldn't send us on the winter days. She wouldn't send us if the temperature was below 8, and otherwise we had to
Bundled up and wet.
bundled up
And wool
walk to school.
clothes, which got wet and had to be.
And we took our sleds up. I forget the family that lived just before you get to the Route 13, little house that sits back, that now has the beautiful pool and such.
The yellow
or-
one?
A natural pool, not a swimming pool.
Oh, in the front yard.
Yeah.
Yes, I
It's
know
on
what
the
you're talking-
side.
Yes.
Yeah. we used to leave our sleds
Barnard
there
Hill Road, yes.
and then pick our sleds up to get home
Mm.
for there. I walk the sled up the hill and I walk the sled down the hill because I was not brave enough to hit the bumps.
So everybody else got home before you did?
Well, Jack especially. In fact, Jack would have been likely to walk up the hill to the Three Pines and slide down again, telling me that he was doing it because he's just checking on me.
Right. What are the Three Pines?
There were 3 huge pine trees just to the brow of Barnard Hill.
Okay.
There were 3 big pines on
And those are gone now?
that they're gone. And I still look for them in my spirit mind envisions. But that was considered probably just about halfway to school, and that was the welcome sight when we got to the Three Pines.
Mm-hmm.
That we, in springtime, we were known to walk home through the woods, not on the road.
Wow.
So that we could check it out on all the brooks and so forth,
And berries?
and well, not in the
Summer.
not in the early spring,
yeah.
but flowers. Grammy Say Hill was the one who had the flower book, and she would challenge us kids that if she heard we were going to go walking in the woods, that was fine. We could pick the flowers if there were 2 of them. We weren't allowed to pick them if there was only 1. And then when we would get home, whatever we had picked, we would sit down
And make arrangements.
we would sit down and get the flower book out
Ah.
and identify
Horticultural lessons.
what we were missing. And that was
How was the lady slipper situation back then? Because now, of course.
well, I know where there's apt to be walking up the hill on the right hand side. Halfway up the hill is the little, us kids used to call it, I never did get the name, little house that grew.
It's got all the, yes.
That
Yes.
little house at that time had only two sections of it, and right up next to their driveway, that at least as of even 5 years ago.
What
there
about
were-
May apples and Mayflowers? I remember Fred Mills said they used to pick them and dig them up, put them in little boxes, and bring them up to Concord, and they would go on the train down to Boston and stuff. And I said, there were that many of them? And he said, yeah, there really were that many. But the problem is there's none now. He said,
No.
we probably took them all.
We all took. and that's probably pretty close to
What happened?
what happened.
Okay.
But we had she always had us on the quest of hepatica, and she had shown us what it looked like in the book and so forth. But that was one that she wanted in particular for us.
What was it like? What's it?
It was pink, and I think it had 5. I think it had 5 parts to the blossom. It only grew about
Was
yay
it
high.
in the Trillium family?
Probably in the trillium, but she would point out to us the difference between that and the violets.
Mm-hmm.
And the violets, she told us we would find everywhere. And then she would give us challenge. Bring me home some yellow ones, please.
Oh.
I mean, she was just marvelous in trying to.
And this was your mother?
No, this was Grammy Say Hill,
Grammy Hill. Okay.
and that was
Mm-hmm.
her part in our education.
Now, did you forage for any wild foods?
No,
No.
no.
Everybody
not-
had their own gardens.
Everyone had their own garden. In fact, our garden at the time was down in the 3rd field where Francis
Did you
now
have
has
to
her
weed
house.
like all the other kids?
Yeah, especially, well, a couple times weeding was there. I remember this is summer afternoon, probably somewhat around this time, the round wash tub,
Mm-hmm.
yay big, was full of string beans. And we had to sit out there under the pine tree all afternoon, stringing the string beans so that she and Grammy could can.
Oh, you pulled that little string off? Yeah.
And took the ends off floor in front. Grammy Say had a big, fancy iron range that hers actually had a water heater on the end part, so that when they were going to do laundry, that she would have the water from whatever, but all year. And in fact, she usually didn't have to heat water to do dishes. She already had it in the big bucket that lived on the back of the stove. But
Right.
she had, I remember both the canning kettle of the old time, which is just the iron with the rack in it.
Mhm.
And then when we got electricity,
Which was around when?
I believe it was 48 or 4, Terry was born in 49. And it was between that part, because the mother's joy was that she would be able to have a washing machine,
A Ringer washing
a
machine.
Ringer washing machine, and also to be able to have hot water without burn. I mean, heating the stove up in the summertime to
Oh,
get water for dishes
yeah.
was the pits. But I learned to cook on the black iron model that we had.
Mhm.
We did maple syrup in the over the winter. Big maple tree just off the yard here was one of the ones that we tapped, and there were a couple of others further up the road that nobody was.
So, if you grew most of your own food, what was someone in the house a hunter? Or how'd you get your meat? Where'd you?
Well, Daddy was working this by then. When we came back from Connecticut, Daddy was to his end days proud member of the Hod Carriers Union, and he worked on construction jobs all over Manchester and the Concord area, so that was where the family income came from.
What grocery store did you frequent? The center store?
The center store was, after school, if mother was out of something, we had to make the trek across the street to the general store to get whatever was of minor sort.
Did you run accounts back then?
Yes, I think they did,
Okay.
and also with the post office.
All in one place.
All in one place. Carrying things home from the general store. When we got before we got electricity, we had a 2-burner kerosene stove in the kitchen to be used in the summertime, so that we didn't have to heat up the whole house. And the kerosene stove, of course, the kerosene came in glass bottles like this.
My grandparents had that. Yep.
Well, how would you like to carry one home from the center store to 31 Alexander
Oh my gosh,
Road?
how'd you do that?
I can remember on one occasion, well, you rested.
You wrapped your arms around?
We must have had a sling of some kind.
Okay.
But would get filled, and then we would make frequent stops to get it home.
Did you ever break one?
I don't remember breaking one, but I can remember being petrified that would be how the kerosene would not get home.
Yes.
Was in that way. Other note on general store, Jack was always I guess an old term would be a cut-up. One of the things, if the folks were shopping at the general store uptown, he was known to steal a couple of dog biscuits, which he would go ahead and eat. You would find him chewing on a gob. And part of it was just to get everybody's attention.
And that was Dave Hadley at the time, or was
Yep,
that?
yep.
Dave Hadley.
Yep. And the penny candy, that was another.
I remember penny candy when I was young. There were actually a few things you could get 2 for a penny.
Yep.
Root
Was
beer barrels.
before school started in the morning, if you were fortunate to get there before 9 o'clock, hitting the store for candy to get you through the day was the part of.
Now, when you were there at the store, Swindlehurst, John Swindlehurst, old man John Swindlehurst, he used to, I don't know if you remember any of this, he helped the sexton dig graves. so he could get called out of school, and he said the windows to the school would be open, and he would be over in the cemetery with the sexton digging a grave, and that after he did that, the sexton would bring him back to the country store and get him a soda or an ice cream. But that he would be out there and everybody would be looking out at him so jealous that he was outside.
Has anyone talked about the kids playing hide and go seek in the cemetery?
Oh, no, they have not.
Oh, there. Boy, that's a boat. Wow. That big equipment. Maybe they're gonna open up the back hill again.
Oh, look, that was a big truck. Not usually that noisy here.
First of all, yeah, there's a third. Wow. What is it?
Eversource. Okay.
Oh,
Public service. Well,
well,
Eversource.
they're gonna do a little tree trimming, maybe?
I don't know, I hope. But,
Wow.
so hide and seek in the cemetery. We know Bill's Valley
we
used to-
had, you know, the two rooms
Yes.
had their little library, which
Mhm.
was
in the corner. I know where it was.
as big as there to here,
Mm-hmm.
and it was kind of circular. If you had finished in the spring and summer and fall, warm days, the teacher would have that back door open into the cemetery. And if you had done with your homework, the work you were supposed to do, those doors were open, and the brave among them would go out and play hide and seek in the cemetery, in both rooms. Of course, the big room,
Yes.
the other.
Yes. And the teachers turned a blind eye, or?
I think they must have. I can't imagine that they went off without her knowing, but they managed to make it in, or when, if they're out there playing, when it was time for the closing of the school, somebody would give the signal and the kids would filter back and make themselves busy in the library at the end of school. In the 1940s, we had a dentist chair set up in the lower room in the library, and we had signed papers from our parents to get fluoride treatment. And that I thought was very unusual.
Some of the old town reports show that the school nurse was responsible for bringing in all kinds of medical care, dental care,
No, we got the
vaccinations.
We got then the polio vaccinations
right.
were
It was written up in the town report.
and I believe also TB.
Mm-hmm.
So these were, and that space, the library space in the rooms is where they did
They set up a dental chair.
they set up a dental chair,
Wow.
which I having come from Connecticut with my kindergarten and first grade, my goodness, they never did anything like that.
So did you go to the dentist when you were kids? Or?
Yes.
And where were the dentists?
Manchester.
Mm-hmm.
This was part of Daddy's union. Union benefits was dental work, and I worked for the families.
Mm-hmm. But most of unless you had a parent that had that type of job, I don't think most of the kids went to the dentist and doctors on a regular basis.
Probably not. Our doctor was Dr. Snay down in Goffstown, and he was still, at least through probably 48 or 9, he was still making house calls.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause I was tended to be a little sickly as a child, and if they couldn't get me out, and likewise when my father fell off the roof, he had started putting a little porch on because they needed space when Terry was born. Then he fell off the roof and was out of work for probably 6 months, and with broken ribs. And I can remember Dr. Snay coming here to the house to check up on him, and that was expected care.
So what else? Let's see. We don't want to go on too long here, but you're just a wealth of everyday information here.
I'm trying to think other unusual things. Well, we didn't mention the bordello, the morphing of the bordello.
Oh, okay.
Here.
The morphing of the
After Jack got out of the service, that was what he started doing. he was doing, well, the Sanders company you eventually got connected to, but before that, he was doing lawnmowers. And,
Now Jack is the one with all the hang gliding and.
no, that's Terry.
Terry. Okay, all right.
And Jack, Jack was the one who built the bordello. You had mentioned yesterday a she shed, and that room, that space was never a she shed.
What I'm saying is your bordello is at this point kind of the precursor to the very popular she shed right now. I have a she shed.
I hate the term, and I hate the man cave. I think both of those are not in. Wow.
It's really busy here today.
I can't imagine where they're going. But yes, but this is five vehicles to do that.
Yeah, whatever.
Anyway.
Okay, unedited, so we're in charge of it.
I'm editing it. Well, Eversource in its new life. Mother had used the space for a very short time. She was the doll maker, and you might want to. I don't know if you have a picture of her sign that's up over the door out here.
I don't, but I will take one.
When you leave, you want that. That when she started making dolls as she went into retirement, she was waitress most of her adult senior years, and then my sister Bobby had encouraged her to, because Mother's dolls at Christmas time was something you waited for all year, and she just started making dolls, and then when she would go to the nurse to her medical appointment, she'd always take a basket with the dolls, and the nurses and so forth, or people in the waiting room would buy the dolls. She wasn't making them for sale.
Do you have one of those around here?
My closet, my cupboard at home is full of them. I was looking for one. What I do have is a doll that Bobby made of Mother, or an old lady doll maker.
Okay.
That is a big size doll.
I'll take a picture of that.
This is one of Bobby's.
Okay.
Up here, which is the girl in the gilded cage.
Yeah.
And that was my husband's favorite of her styles. But Mother's were huggables. And in fact, Kelly St. Ange was here yesterday afternoon and talking about Mother's dolls. She lives down the lane. But talking about Mother's dolls, of how she and her sister had appreciated them. But Mother kept her overflow, when she was busy, her overflow of fabric out there, and that was the only thing that was going on in that space at all. The summertime she might do cutting. As a child, one of the music wonders that I would hear if I were in a living room reading, I would hear the cutting of the scissors on the wooden table, and I would have to come and watch her cut. Usually it was clothing, but because she was making us a doll, we never got to see any of it until the occasion.
I used to make all my own clothes when I was young.
Well, I learned on a treadle machine, on her treadle machine, which she used. One of the garments that she made me, I hated it from the day that it was presented, and that was a one-piece snowsuit when I was 7, and she made it for me to be able to wear to walk to school and be warm. And I thought that was the ugliest thing that had ever come off her table.
What color was it?
It was maroon. Real maroon color.
At least it wasn't pink.
At least it wasn't pink. I might have given it at that time more consideration but to me it was just plain ugly. And that was it. And I think I even had a little chat one time with Mrs. Hayes, because she had to help me get out of it when we got to school in the morning.
More work for the teacher.
It was more work for the teacher. And I was talking about, I wished I didn't have to make it. And she gave me the talk of, you should be glad that your mother has the cloth and the machine. And that was how she encouraged me to be thankful.
That's a good one.
And
So you have given us a ton of information about minutia, and day to day, and what people did, and how they got around, and your little corner of Dunbarton over here, which, you know, once upon a time the road went all the way through to Ware, so there's more traffic, and normally it's very quiet here, except for public service is invaded with about 5 large vehicles. So, but is there anything you'd like to say in closing about your time in Dunbarton?
I think that my childhood in Dunbarton was, thinking the way kids are today, was a dream, living separated from the center as we were. The friends that we had at school, because other than the Ramseys, Ramseys were, one of my other homes was the Ramseys as well as Mrs. Gravis's. And the education that I got, the parties that the town had, the Christmas party, after we got done at school with our recitations and so forth at the Stone Hall, Town Hall, we all got a stocking with an orange, a real big fat orange in the toe of the stocking, and that was something that all of us looked forward to.
I was told that Dr. Paulson, who lived in the little cottage on Town Farm Lane, was called Santa Claus because every year he would make sure every child in Dunbarton had a gift. And I'm wondering if some of those stockings came, or the oranges.
Oh, that's what I'm wondering, if that was if that was part of the gift that he gave, because that was really well, the fact that the town, they took time out to have the Memorial Day. They took time out, and it wasn't just to give the school kids. The last thing was to give the school kids an introduction into civic life. I'm sure that was somewhere in the heart of it, but that was not the emphasis of the way they went about giving us a civic life or making us aware of the civic life.
And that
is unique in my experience and in talking with others. Talking with.
So you'd do it all again if you could?
I would do it all again if I would have done it all with my kids if I could. My home in Washington, Pennsylvania is a county seat. It is also graced with the facility of Washington and Jefferson College. There are 2 high schools within spitting distance that are 2 different townships, the Washington School District and the Trinity School District. But there is a togetherness, but separateness. And here in Dunbarton, other than the fact we knew there was another school in the area, Montalona, but we very seldom ever got to see the kids.
And can you imagine when there were 11 school districts? Yeah. So all in all, things were good.
All in all, things were good. There was an occasion, I mentioned my father falling off the roof, and lo and behold, we came home one afternoon, because that was a tough time for that. My mother had yet to start working, and it was when Daddy was not going to be able to work, she realized she had to get out there. So she honed her driving skills to get out of town. But we came home from school, and there was, I'm going to say, a toilet paper box full of groceries that had been delivered by the selectmen. And we were so excited because everything was in it, but it was huge. Everything was in it. And my father came out in the kitchen and he saw it and he said, call them up and take it back. And we was like, what do you mean? And he said, I'm not on the town dole. And that meant something to him. So anyway, he got talked into keeping the box, and we all said, thank you, Selectman, and we forgive you, Daddy. But there was that kind of cureness going around. I mean, we were kids who go to the town school. And that, well, I did say my dad would always try to make a point of going to town meeting, and the same with mother. And they always voted. They were registered voters from way back. Daddy was Democrat, mother was Republican, and that was the votes that.
Okay. But your childhood was. Everyone says the same thing that we've interviewed. They just loved growing up here.
But we had like not being able to go to school for a week because we couldn't get out of our yard. There were lots of little occasions like that, but they were not. That's not the part of growing up here. My daughters they grew up in Western Pennsylvania, went to school here in the East, and they never came home again to Pennsylvania, but they make a big point of spending time here at 31 Alexander Road.
Well, I want to thank you very, very much,
You're welcome.
and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Donna.
Okay.